The alley stank of old beer and desperation, the kind of place where shadows loitered longer than people. A street lamp flickered weakly at the corner, casting jagged patterns over broken bottles and discarded wrappers. The air was thick with the hum of tension, the kind that pricks the back of your neck and tells you to turn the other way. But Ethan Kane didn't turn. He walked with deliberate strides, his heavy boots crunching against the gravel-strewn pavement. His leather jacket hung open, revealing a web of tattoos etched across his arms and chest. Some were intricate, like the falcon poised mid-flight on his forearm. Others were crude, like the jagged initials inked near his wrist. Each told a story, though none of them were meant to be shared. "Hey, tough guy." A voice cut through the air, slurred and reckless. Ethan stopped. Slowly, he turned his head toward the group of men clustered under the flickering light. There were 5 of them, their postures loose and arrogant. Each wore the uniform of urban disillusionment: ripped jeans, oversized hoodies, and enough swagger to drown a smaller man in fear. But Ethan wasn't smaller, and he wasn't afraid. "You deaf or just stupid?" Another thug stepped forward, a wiry man with a jagged scar running down his cheek. He held a knife, twirling it between his fingers like it was a toy. Ethan tilted his head slightly, his eyes dark and unreadable. "I don't want trouble," he said, his voice low but firm. "Oh, we don't want trouble either," Scarface sneered. "Just a little fun." The group laughed, the sound grating and hollow. Ethan stayed still, his hands resting loosely at his sides. He didn't blink, didn't flinch. Years of discipline had taught him to measure every breath, every movement. But the thugs mistook his stillness for fear. The laughter died down, replaced by an uneasy silence. Scarface stepped closer, his knife glinting in the faint light. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?" Ethan's eyes flicked to the blade, then back to the man's face. "Last chance," he said evenly, his voice barely above a growl. "Walk away." The leader of the group, a broad-shouldered man with a shaved head and a permanent sneer, barked a laugh. "Who do you think you are, huh? Some kind of tough guy?" He gestured to the tattoos on Ethan's arms. "What are these, your little doodles? Trying to look scary?" Ethan didn't respond. He didn't need to. The shaved-headed man didn't like being ignored. "Let's teach him some manners." 2 of the thugs lunged forward. Ethan moved before they could even process it. The first man swung a punch wide and careless. Ethan sidestepped, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting it with bone-snapping force. The thug howled, dropping to his knees as Ethan shoved him backward. The second thug hesitated, startled by the sudden violence. That hesitation cost him. Ethan delivered a sharp elbow to the man's jaw, sending him sprawling onto the pavement. Scarface cursed, brandishing his knife. He charged, aiming for Ethan's ribs. It was a mistake. Ethan caught the knife hand in mid-swing, twisting it until Scarface yelped in pain. The blade clattered to the ground. In one fluid motion, Ethan delivered a punishing knee to Scarface's stomach, dropping him like a sack of bricks. The remaining 2 thugs exchanged nervous glances. One of them, a wiry teenager with shaky hands, took a step back. I didn't sign up for this," he muttered, his voice cracking. "Shut up," the leader snapped. He turned back to Ethan, his bravado faltering. "Who the hell are you?" Ethan stepped forward, his shadow looming over the gang leader. For the first time, his voice carried weight, the kind that demanded attention. "I'm the man who gave you a warning. You didn't listen." For a moment, the alley faded away. Ethan was back in the desert, the sun a merciless blaze overhead. His unit moved in silence, their boots crunching over the sand. They were a team of 6, each one a brother forged in the crucible of war. Ethan had been their leader, the one who made the hard calls. That day, they were deep in enemy territory. Intel had said the village was clear, but the ambush came fast and brutal. Bullets rained down like a storm, and the air filled with screams and the acrid scent of gunpowder. Ethan fought like a man possessed, his training taking over. But no amount of skill could save everyone. One by one, his brothers fell, their shouts of pain searing into his memory. When the dust settled, Ethan was the only one left standing. The tattoos on his arms weren't for decoration, they were memorials. Each name inked into his skin was a promise never to forget. The leader swung at Ethan, his movements wild with desperation. Ethan sidestepped effortlessly, his fist connecting with the man's jaw in a single, precise strike. The leader collapsed, groaning. The teenager froze, his eyes wide with fear. He held a rusty chain, but his hands shook so badly he could barely grip it. Ethan stared at him, his expression softening for the first time. "Go home, kid," he said, his tone quieter now. The teenager dropped the chain, stumbling back. He turned and ran, disappearing into the night. Ethan looked down at the crumpled forms of the remaining thugs. None of them were seriously hurt, he had made sure of that. Violence, he had learned, wasn't about destruction. It was about control. Ethan returned to his small apartment, the adrenaline fading. The space was sparse, almost barren, save for a worn couch and a coffee table cluttered with books and half-empty mugs. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, his hands steady despite the day's events. The images of his fallen brothers crept into his mind. He could still hear their voices, feel the weight of their trust. He had survived, but survival wasn't the same as living. A knock at the door startled him. Ethan frowned, setting the glass down. When he opened the door, he saw the teenager from the alley standing there, his face pale and his eyes red-rimmed. I didn't know who else to go to," the kid stammered. Ethan studied him for a long moment. Then, without a word, he stepped aside, letting the boy in. The kid shuffled into the apartment, his shoulders hunched like he was bracing for a storm. Ethan closed the door behind him, his gaze steady but not unkind. The boy looked around, taking in the bare walls and the simple furniture. "You didn't say why you're here," Ethan said, leaning against the wall, arms crossed. The kid hesitated, his hands fidgeting with the frayed hem of his hoodie. I didn't know what else to do. They're gonna come after me for running." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Who's they?" The kid shot him a look like he was asking a stupid question. "The gang. You think they're just gonna let me walk away after tonight?" Ethan's lips twitched into the faintest hint of a smile, but there was no humor in it. "You're worried about them after what you saw tonight?" The kid flushed, his voice rising defensively. "I don't have your moves, okay? I'm not like you." Ethan's expression softened. He gestured toward the couch. "Sit." The boy hesitated but obeyed, sinking into the worn cushions. Ethan took a seat in the armchair across from him, his piercing gaze never leaving the boy's face. "What's your name?" Ethan asked. "Tyler," the boy mumbled. "All right, Tyler, tell me how you ended up running with those guys." Tyler looked away, his jaw tightening. "You wouldn't understand." Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Try me." Tyler's words came slowly at first, like pulling teeth, but once he started, it all came out in a rush. He talked about a home that barely felt like one, a mother who worked double shifts and a father who'd skipped town years ago. He talked about falling in with the gang because they promised him something no one else had, a sense of belonging. "I thought they were my family," Tyler admitted, his voice trembling. "But it's all fake. They only care about you if you're useful." Ethan listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When Tyler finally stopped, the room was heavy with his words. "You're right," Ethan said quietly. "I don't know what that's like." Tyler's head snapped up, surprise flashing across his face. "But I know what it's like to lose people you care about," Ethan continued. His gaze dropped to the tattoos on his forearm. "And I know how easy it is to get lost trying to find something to hold on to." Tyler stared at him, the defiance in his eyes giving way to something closer to hope. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his voice taking on a firm edge. "If you're serious about leaving that life behind, you're going to have to fight for it. It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be quick, but I can help." Tyler blinked, disbelief flickering across his face. "Why would you do that?" "Because someone gave me a second chance once," Ethan said simply. "I figure it's time I pay it forward." Tyler hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, I'm in." Ethan nodded back, a small spark of approval in his eyes. "Good. First things first, if they're coming after you, we need to make sure you're ready." The next morning, Ethan led Tyler to a nearby park before dawn. The city was still asleep, the streets shrouded in a cool gray mist. "What are we doing here?" Tyler asked, rubbing his hands together against the cold. Ethan dropped a heavy duffel bag at his feet. "We're starting with the basics. You need discipline, strength, and focus. All the stuff your gang life never taught you." Tyler groaned. "I thought you were just going to teach me how to fight." Ethan smirked. "That comes later. First, you need to learn how not to fight unless you have no other choice." For weeks, Ethan put Tyler through grueling training sessions. They ran laps, practiced calisthenics, and drilled situational awareness until Tyler's muscles ached and his patience were thin. But Ethan didn't just teach Tyler how to fight, he taught him how to think. They spent hours going over strategy, control, and the importance of choosing battles wisely. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone," Ethan told him one day, his tone serious. "The only person you need to be better than is the one you were yesterday." It didn't take long for the gang to come looking for Tyler. They found him one night as he was leaving Ethan's apartment, a group of 6 waiting in the shadows. Tyler froze, his instincts screaming at him to run, but he forced himself to stay put. Ethan's voice echoed in his head. "Stay calm. Use your training." The leader stepped forward, a wiry man with cold eyes. "You think you can just walk away from us, Tyler?" Tyler stood tall, his hands loose at his sides. "I'm done with you." The leader sneered, signaling his men to move in. But before they could lay a hand on Tyler, Ethan appeared. He moved with the quiet precision of a predator, stepping into the light with an air of unshakable confidence. "You boys don't want to do this," Ethan said, his voice calm but laced with steel. The gang members hesitated, their bravado faltering under Ethan's unyielding gaze. The leader glared at Ethan. "You think you can take all of us?" Ethan's smirk was faint but deadly. "I don't think. I know." The fight was swift and brutal. Ethan moved like a force of nature, dismantling the gang with calculated efficiency. Tyler watched, his heart pounding as he saw everything Ethan had taught him in action. When the dust settled, the gang lay scattered and groaning, their confidence shattered. Ethan stood over them, his expression hard. "This is your warning. Stay away from him." The gang scrambled to their feet and fled, dragging their wounded with them. In the weeks that followed, Tyler threw himself into his training with renewed determination. He started working a legitimate job and even enrolled in night classes, slowly building a life he could be proud of. Ethan watched from the sidelines, offering guidance when needed but letting Tyler forge his own path. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace, knowing he had made a difference. One crisp morning, Tyler joined Ethan at the park, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thanks," he said simply, handing one to Ethan. Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Just keep going, kid. That's all that matters." As the sun rose over the city, their shadows stretched long across the ground, 2 men shaped by their scars. walking forward into a brighter future. Months passed. The city moved on, as it always did, its pulse never slowing for the lives within it. For Tyler and Ethan, the world had shifted in quiet but profound ways. Ethan stood at the edge of a cemetery one cool afternoon, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his jacket. Before him were 6 gravestones, lined in perfect symmetry. Each bore a name, a date, and a simple engraving, "Forever in service." He traced the tattoos on his forearm absently, running his fingers over the names inked into his skin. "I kept my promise," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the rustle of the wind. Behind him, footsteps approached. He didn't turn. "I figured I'd find you here," Tyler said, his voice steady but quiet. Ethan glanced back. The kid looked different now, cleaner, stronger. His shoulders no longer sagged under invisible weight, and there was a light in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "What's on your mind?" Ethan asked, turning back to the graves. Tyler shifted uneasily. "I wanted to say thank you for everything." Ethan nodded but didn't respond. "I've been thinking a lot," Tyler continued, "about what you said, about being better than the guy I was yesterday." He hesitated, then added, "I think I finally get it now." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah?" Tyler nodded. "I've been working with a youth program downtown. Kids like me, ones who think gangs are their only shot." That caught Ethan's attention. He turned to face Tyler fully, studying him with an intensity that made the boy shift under the weight of it. "You think you're ready for that?" Ethan asked. Tyler met his gaze, unflinching. "No," he admitted, "but that's the point, right? You weren't ready for the things you faced either, but you did them anyway." For a moment, Ethan said nothing. Then a slow smile spread across his face. Not the smirk he wore in fights, but something softer, almost proud. "You've come a long way, kid," he said. Tyler grinned, his confidence shining through. "Guess I had a good teacher." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the cemetery gates. 2 men were arguing loudly, their shouts echoing through the quiet grounds. Ethan tensed instinctively, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. Tyler followed his gaze, his expression mirroring Ethan's concern. "Stay here," Ethan said, his voice sharp. "No way," Tyler shot back. "You said I'm ready. Let me prove it." Ethan hesitated, his instincts warring with the trust he had in the young man. Finally, he nodded. "Fine, but follow my lead." They approached the men cautiously. One was an older man, dressed in a shabby coat, his face lined with desperation. The other was younger, stockier, and clearly angry. "What's going on here?" Ethan asked, his tone calm but commanding. The younger man turned to them, his expression dark. "None of your business." "Actually," Tyler interjected, surprising even himself with the confidence in his voice, "it is our business if you're causing trouble." The older man looked at them, his eyes pleading. "He's trying to take my stuff. I don't have much, but—" "Shut up," the younger man snarled, raising a fist. Before he could strike, Tyler stepped forward, his stance steady. "That's enough," he said firmly. The younger man hesitated, his aggression faltering under Tyler's calm resolve. Ethan watched from the sidelines, ready to intervene if things escalated, but Tyler didn't need him. "Look," Tyler said, his voice steady but empathetic. "Whatever's going on, this isn't the way. Trust me, I've been where you are. It doesn't end well." The younger man stared at him, something shifting in his expression. Slowly, he lowered his fist. "You don't know anything about me," he muttered, but the fight had drained out of him. "Maybe not," Tyler admitted, "but I know you don't have to do this. You've got a choice." After a tense moment, the younger man turned and walked away. The older man sagged with relief, thanking them profusely before leaving as well. Ethan stepped up beside Tyler, his expression unreadable. "You handled that well," he said finally. Tyler shrugged, but the pride in his eyes was unmistakable. "Just trying to be better than yesterday." Later that evening, Ethan and Tyler sat on a rooftop overlooking the city. The lights stretched out before them, a glittering expanse of hope and hardship. "You've come a long way," Ethan said, breaking the silence. "So have you," Tyler replied, glancing at the older man. Ethan chuckled softly. "Maybe." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of their journeys hanging between them like an unspoken bond. Finally, Tyler spoke. "You ever think about what's next for you?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He stared out at the city, the wind tugging at his jacket. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but for now, this is enough." Tyler nodded, understanding. As the night deepened, they stayed there, two men who had found purpose in the unlikeliest of places. In the distance, the first light of dawn began to break, painting the sky in hues of gold and orange. It was a new day, a chance to be better than yesterday. And for Ethan and Tyler, that was more than enough.